Yesterday we hosted a teaching by Kinjin Rinpoche, one of the people that I consider as teacher. As I said, they never, allowed that name to be attached to them. I was listening to a podcast by Karl Brunholzer, who has translated so many texts. Basically, I think Dzogchen Ponlo Rinpoche even called him a Kempo. Although the title Kempo is actually only allowed for monastics. It was an original monastic position, So I don't think he's monastic. So, but anyway, in terms of his learning, definitely excels even, most of the run-of-the-mill Kempos. But there was a podcast interview, the Wisdom Experience, which I've been listening to, various different ones. Chugyinima Rinpoche has, Elizabeth Namgyal, and Zika Kongtu. Then a lot of other people from other traditions, as in not even Tibetan. Listening to the one by Karl, and Karl talked about Brunhauser. I call him Karl not because I know him, but because his last name is so long, and in the interview, he talked about how when he asked, I think Khenpo Sudrum Gyamso, Rinpoche, would he be his teacher? And he said, Khenpo Sudrum Gyamso made this face that was like such a face of being disgusted by that question, like, followed by like reaching out and pinching Karl, and then said to him, the guru is not this body.
Ooh.
Yeah. And then followed by, he said, anyway, yes, I will teach you. Anyway, I will teach you, Karl was like, he made this real disgusted face, like, what did you just ask me? And then pinch him and said, the guru is not this body. That's why in Guru Yoga practice, it always says, you arise as Idam, Guru arise in the form of Vajradhara or Guru Rinpoche, one of these exalted forms. At the heart of that is always reminding us, the Buddha and the Buddha or the Guru isn't these five aggregates. But then at the same time, independent of the five aggregates, there's no need to talk about Guru and Buddha. Right? So that's like the kind of, I call it the creative tension, that is always at the heart of the most important things. The simple things are, often just very straightforward, it's either yes or no, but those things, are not what's ultimately most significant, most important. The things that are ultimately most significant and important, it always has this tension. Yeah. It doesn't fall this way, it doesn't fall that way. They say it's like standing on this very sharp blade, If you know how to stand on this sharp blade, then you won't get cut, That's a more tantric, Vajrayana kind of analogy, balancing yourself on this, sharp blade. Yesterday, after Kinchen Rinpoche's teachings, maybe to just kind of cool down, then I went on Facebook and found another teaching, a Theravada monk in the Thai forest tradition. So anyway, he was talking about meditation. He wasn't talking about anything Tibetan at all. He was talking about, hey, I see two crows up there enjoying a slice of white bread. Yeah. Right now, Nepal is celebrating the 5 days of Diwali. And they call it Tihar. So Tihar celebration is quite different from Diwali around the world. Diwali is puja to the goddess of prosperity, Lakshmi. visiting friends, giving gifts, almost becoming like Christmas, but mostly sweets. But Tihar in Nepal has a unique tradition of honoring five animals. Apparently, those four animals, and maybe you saw my Facebook, the four animals are associated actually with King Yama, with death. So it's an interesting celebration. It's sort of like you make friends with Yama's four messengers,
Wow.
Yama's four animals. So I guess one way of looking at it, maybe for most people, is just to like, don't come for me. um, but for us, a deeper look at that is to say, you get to know Yama, a lot of Death's friends, pets, that we should, uh, familiarize ourselves with, Yama's pets. So the first day is the crow puja, literally. So they do pujas to crows. So they leave out this banana leaves with like food, out on top of walls and high places. So crows will come and eat. So that's the crow puja day. First day. Second day is the dog, which would be today. It's the dog puja day, and so all the dogs are fed and put on garlands, and then given special treat.
Powder on too.
Yeah, put the red dots and
Right.
all that. They would do that to the crows too, except it's not so easy. Then the third day is the puja to cows. Fourth day is puja to oxen. Fifth day is specifically sisters doing puja to the brothers. And then the brothers, I think, tying, or was it the sisters tying a red like protection cord?
Uh-huh.
So there's a notion that the sister has certain powers that she can use to protect the brother. So that brother thing is probably about bloodline, like ensuring that the bloodline continues. But the daughter has certain powers, kind of Shakti related to Hindu notions of Shakti being associated with women, have a certain way, interdependence, I guess, in Buddhist terms, that can protect the brothers. So the 5 days of Tihar. Anyway, got distracted by the crows up there. Um, but yeah, like the most important things, it's often so. Anyway, this monk gave an analogy about he was giving an explanation of from within his tradition. How do you understand samadhi? So samadhi often is translated as meditative equipoise, which connotes a very deep state of withdrawal from everything, and the mind is like deep in a state of absorption. So, like the Heart Sutra, it says that at the beginning of the Heart Sutra, the Buddha enters this samadhi. So, while he remained in the samadhi of the enumerations of the dharmas, the profound samadhi of the enumerations of the dharma, then Avalokiteshvara, right, teaches the Heart Sutra. So that's a type of samadhi. So there are many, many types of samadhi with different names. So often samadhi then across different Buddhist traditions often has the connotation of being something very focused. So this teacher was saying, this forest monk was saying that then often people think that it's like laser like, like focus. He says it's not that, at least, from within their tradition, their main teacher who has passed, Ajahn Chah. He says, Lompo Cha, Lompo is like the Thai affectionate term. It's like venerable father. He says, Lompo Cha's way of explaining samadhi, he says, it's sort of like holding on, on to a little bird, where you need to have just enough of a grip, to hold it. so that it doesn't fly away. But if you know, too strong, you will harm the bird. So it says the mind has to be in such a state where it can hold the thoughts so that it doesn't become like the bird flying away. But it's not that kind of focus that we often think of, like so focus, that it crushes the bird. So there are some legends, and I was thinking in my mind, like extending that example he gave. I was thinking like, there are some legends. I'm not a legend because I've not seen it myself, either with my own eyes or even on YouTube, although I have not gone looking for it. They say that Tai Chi masters, which is all about being aware of their body and lightness and, being very aware of subtle movements of energy, that at least in theory, a good Tai Chi practitioner can have a bird stand on their palm and never really need to hold the bird. Why? Because the bird can never take off. Why? Because for a bird to take off, they have to press against some surface. And a Tai Chi master is so in tune to the subtle movements of, so every time the bird pushes, he lets, he relaxes. And so the bird would never get enough, to push up against to take off. It's like that kind of very flexible mind, but not distracted. That's samadhi. And rather than frozen, samadhi, frozen in something and not able to, like lost consciousness of everything. Yeah. Anyway, I thought that's a helpful understanding of what samadhi might be talking about. Of course, ultimately, like we don't know what samadhi is, but that way of explaining samadhi is helpful. Helps us to try to cultivate a state of mind that is. So I think this teacher, he said like it's like not being moved, yeah, but not in a rigid way of not being moved. So yesterday earlier when Kenjan Rinpoche was teaching, he said, it's like he was teaching a particular song, a particular teaching from a collection by the founder of Drigong Kagyu. So he says there, whenever it says like, single pointedly, single pointedly, repeatedly, without, giving in to anything else, he says, we're not talking about like rigidly trying to get your mind or your focus, on the Dharma. He says it's something much more comprehensive, holistic. Yeah, that so that for you, then there is no more distractions, and it's not about going around clubbing, not clubbing, but with a club, yeah, whacking all your distractions away, but rather your commitment, your interest, your focus is so completely immersed in the Dharma that what normally turns up as a distraction, what normally turns up as an obstacle, ceases to be so. And he says that cannot come from being rigid with your mind. It comes from an understanding that keeps growing, and then becomes more and more comprehensive and all encompassing. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So he gave first time he was teaching on Zoom. We had maybe 280 people. Just kind of announce, not much publicity or anything like that. So, and he thinks he will do more of it, and so we're scheduling more. So keep your eyes open. Anyway, there is a link on YouTube that I will share. That is the recording from yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah. Rinpoche is in his mid 70s. So now he's living in Madison, Wisconsin. Yeah. So anyway, where are you all with Milarepa? There's a lot of mysterious things, in this volume. So, and then there are even things that probably, not very appropriate for us, really. It's not meant to be, So always remember that, So that when you read certain things, don't try too hard. It's like, what does that mean? I'm editing and working on a book of His Holiness the Drung Kyabgun's commentary on the Ganga Mahamudra. So I have a friend who is almost retired religion professor, trained in the Western tradition, but Buddhism is his religion practice, and so he's helping to read and edit, and then there are parts where very useful comments, and then there are parts with those comments, when I was going through those comments with him, I said, well, over here, yeah, that's what it is. And he was like, but I don't understand what it means. I said, guess what? I think most people have no idea what it means, including the people giving the commentary. I said, so please complain to Tilopa, It's like, it could research all the different commentaries that are available. Nobody really knows what Tilopa is talking about. So they kind of fudge, and yes, you like, yeah, it's fudging here, or this metaphor, this analogy, it doesn't really work. I was like, well, you can complain to Tilopa, it's not really working for you, this analogy. Basically six ways Tilopa uses the analogy of space as to indicate qualities of the mind. 6 ways that involves space. So likewise, there are things here. Don't get bent out of shape.
Yeah.
There's a lot of mysterious things in here. Melissa, we have to do lip reading.
Can you hear me?
Okay, now we can.
Oh, okay. Well, my bookmark was in the middle of chapter 23, the later visit to Drakyavadra fortress.
Yeah, your voice is a little soft, yeah?
Okay, I'll try to adjust it, sorry.
233.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, I think better now.
Okay. I was just saying my bookmark was in the middle of chapter 23. That was page 240. I don't know if that's
the later visit to Drakya Vajra Fortress.
I think it's kind of long, and we read through it, and then we were going through it a second time. If
like the 30 instructions?
Yes, I think. Right?
On 240?
Yes. I think that's where we were stopped.
Is that where we think we are, everybody?
I have notes from, I don't know, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I have notes from you talking with us about this chapter up to page 237, I think. Yeah, so, and we stopped rereading around page 240. is from-
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So 240 seems like a good place to start. If it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Jim, do you have where that is on the for the Kindle?
It is chapter 23, and somewhere in the middle of the chapter. Yeah, in the beginning of the second half of chapter 23.
Starting with.
This is after he sang a song about the six bardos. A different listing of the bardos. Here, bardos are used in a more general sense of the word, as in the in-betweens, neither here nor there, in between, rather than the more specific reference of bardo, like in the so-called Tibetan Book of the Dead. Talks about the four bardos and sometimes elaborated into the six bardos. The list, the six bardos that you have right before this section on the 30 instructions, it's a more poetic sense of bardo. Rather than, in this bardo you'll see this and that, and then as you enter the second bardo, all the peaceful wrathful deities would arise. Not that kind of bardo. This is a more general sense of bardo. And so in between appearance and emptiness, in between bliss and emptiness, in between attachment and non-attachment, in between faults and faultless, in between hypocrisy, in between samsara and nirvana, in between words and their meaning. That should be a pretty good one too. But anyway, let's look at the 30 instructions of the Guru. It'll be very pithy. There is a book that you all should be on the lookout for. It's the 108. I don't know the title of the book, but if you look around, it's the 108 instructions of the Rechungpa lineage. It's actually not literally 108 instructions of Rechungpa. It's one of the Rechungpa lineage masters compiled 108 from across traditions.
what is Rechungpa? Can you spell that word?
Jonang. Jonang is a lineage of Tibetan Buddhism
Okay.
that was suppressed during the fifth Dalai Lama's time because of some, it's often related to politics, there are even some studies that showed that, Jonangpa's fifth Dalai Lama's mother was married to a Rechungpa master who then, I think, divorced her. So there's even some speculation that the fifth Dalai Lama was upset with that. And Rechungpas are also famous for espousing. They are the ones who popularized this expression, other emptiness. So those of you who read about these things, self-emptiness and other emptiness, Rantong, Shentong, Rechungpas were the first to kind of forcefully advocate Shentong, other emptiness. So this lineage has been suppressed, like the Dalai Lama's government, took over all their monasteries, took all their texts and locked them up.
Oh.
One copy each, the rest burned.
Oh.
Yeah, definitely. A few days, maybe last week, I was going through the history of Drigong Kagyu, and it's messy karma with the Sakyapa lineage. Started off with intellectual differences. Sakyapa lineage is a very learned. They are great scholars. So their approach to in articulating the Dharma is all very exacting. It's all about categories. It's all about being clear with how you define things and where they belong, and you have to be able to file them into the right, folders and boxes. So then they took exception to the Kagyupas in general. And they're like, Kagyupas are kind of like wishy-washy and make up their own things. And so, then one of the most prominent Kagyupas of the 12th century is the founder of Drigong Kagyu. And so Sakya Pandita wrote extensively, like critiquing that. So that's one layer of like differences. But unfortunately, politics got into the picture. So the founder of the lineage died in 1217. Then in 1290, Drigong was burned to the ground by Mongol forces that support the Sakyapas. But that is clearly a political matter. Not because, but unfortunately, in the background, there was already this intellectual disagreement, then they like burn it to the ground. The legend says that the only people that survived that destruction were those who had the power to actually literally fly. Otherwise, the rest perished. So my point to the group that I was telling the story to, I said, from that perspective, we have made much progress. These days, our political differences, you might think is really terrible. Well, at least we're not burning down people's houses,
Yeah.
Then second lesson is, even people who can more or less agree on the same religious tradition, on the Dharma, and not just any religious tradition, even the Buddha Dharma, right? Still, Buddha Dharma did not save them from the messiness of politics. So to me, that is, rather than whitewashing the history of Tibet, see very clearly, people were, still killing each other, So for good or for bad, just understand that, just because we have an agreement on the Buddha Dharma to some degree, that's not necessarily going to solve our political problems. Because politics is, at the end of the day, part of cyclic existence. So handle with care, yeah. In that way, Dharma itself is easier. So anyway, got distracted again.
We like it when you get distracted, though. Yeah.
So these, the 108 instructions of the Rechungpa, this book is coming out, I think, end of this year. So it's great because, as I said, not that, if it is purely Rechungpa, is not great, but the title is a little misleading. So when you see it, you might go, I don't know what Rechungpa is. Why do I want a book on 108 instructions from them? But actually, it's misleading because one of the great Rechungpa masters. So the Rechungpa, they are also famous for Kalachakra. They're very famous for their Kalachakra. They're very famous for their other emptiness emphasis. So anyway, this collection is basically a Rechungpa master. And this is the third characteristic, perhaps, that shows that they're actually very rime, so to say, even before this term was used. So one of their great masters compiled 108 different instructions from all across before Tibetan Buddhism became so streamlined into, the 4 lineages or the 5 lineages or whatever. And so he collected all of them and put them together as a set. Then it became known as like the 108 jewels or something like that of the Rechungpa. So I already saw on like Amazon, not that I'm encouraging people to buy from Amazon per se, but I already saw on Amazon them, saying that it's forthcoming. It's published by Shambhala. So if you want to go look for it, Shambhala Publications. So now 30 instructions of the Guru.
Wait, can I ask you a question
Yes,
about that one?
sure. Mhm.
Did the Janungpas, did their stuff get absorbed into the other schools?
Some of it, yes, but their texts all got locked up in
Oh,
the Dribong library.
okay.
But then apparently these we are learning more. There's a lot of things even in Tibet, that is unknown from one valley to the next valley. So for a long time, people thought that for the most part, Jonangpa teachings was continued in various forms. So like the Gelugpas government that banned the Jonangpa, they nonetheless valued their Kalachakra.
Right.
So that continued.
Okay.
Yeah. So various aspects of Jonangpa, yes, did continue in that way.
Yeah.
But apparently, there were some remote monasteries in eastern Tibet that continued to be Jonangpa uninterrupted.
Thank
Yeah.
Thank
So these days they are, trying to revive those monasteries.
Okay.
So in that sense, then uh, their lineage transmission remain unbroken. Yeah, I mean, various streams within that bigger lineage was unbroken, carried by people, parked in different lineages. But apparently, more than that, as an intact tradition, there were some remote monasteries in eastern Tibet that managed to escape that ban. Maybe because they were so remote, nobody really know what they're doing out there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
yeah, sure. Then, of course, the great Rime masters in the late 19th, early 20th century, Jamgon Gongzhu, uh, Chogyal Lingpa, and Jamyang Kensei Wangpo. They did many things to revive Chonangpa traditions as well. Yeah. So these three names, it's good to know them because, especially in current present day Kagyu Nyingma, these three names are very influential. Interestingly, for Drigong Kagyu, we never quite got much influence for these three names. So not for my reason, I'm telling you. But generally, like Kamakagyu, Nyingma, these three names are really important. Jamyang, the oldest of the three, I think, is Jamyang Kensei Wangpo, then Chugyo Lingpa, then Jamgong Gongzhu. These three are really influential figures. They were at the heart of the what's now known as the Rime movement for the revival of all the traditions. And they had the foresight, whether they knew or they didn't know, cultural revolution is going to happen. First the communists take over, and then 10 years later or so, cultural revolution. More than 10 years, 20 years later, cultural revolution. And that, really caused a lot of destruction. So thank goodness for these three that went in search of all various and sundry traditions. They collected together, produced these encyclopedic collections of texts that were then mass transmitted to ensure continuity. And because of them, many of the traditions survived the Chinese takeover. Yeah. So these 30 instructions here are basically very useful one-liners. And here he says, 30 instructions the Guru taught. So he must be referring to Marpa. Yeah, Milarepa must be referring to Marpa. Son, for reliance, the jewels are excellent, he said, meaning the three jewels. Yeah, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. They are the most excellent, so you rely on them. Keep keep to faith as your friend. Faith as in, like your trust in why the three jewels are excellent. Your understanding why the three jewels are refuge in ways that no other things can be a refuge, in the same way. Of course, a lot of things can be a refuge, like if you're cold, a good warm jacket is your refuge, against cold. I think it would be foolish to say, oh, I'll supplicate the three jewels. Yeah. If you're hungry, food is the refuge, right? So the excellent three are excellent. We need to know, in what ways they are supreme, so that we don't turn into, Buddhist Nazis or fundamentalists like Buddha Dharma Sangha is great. I said, no, and they're great in a specific way, right? And if we understand that, then it's easier to do the next thing. Keep to faith as your friend. A friend as in it can help you, You can rely on this faith. And this faith is always an informed faith. A faith that arises from understanding. And we still need to use that faith because it's not we still need faith because there are things that our senses and our logic cannot yet show us what exactly is going on, right? So faith as a friend, seeing faith as a friend. Concepts are a great demon, a foe. So concepts here is I don't know what the Tibetan is, and I think it's probably namto. So here then is talking about if we are deceived by our perceptions, thinking that how something appears to us is truly how they are, then they are a great demon. Pride is a great Mara. Demon. Pride is a great Mara. And there are so many shades of this pride, There's the pride that arises from knowing too much. There's a pride that arises from what I know to be true must definitely be true, So there's even a very limited kind of pride, but it can also be very strong, I know better. It's a great demon. Because why? Because it obstructs you from being able to learn from anyone. That's more specifically, right? So they say, if you don't know how to learn, then no matter, even Buddha Shakyamuni in front of us, it's not going to make any difference. If we know how to learn, then we can learn from everyone. Yeah? But pride is often an obstacle. Slander is a great negative action, he said. Jealousy. I don't think I need to say much about how slander is a great negative action, except maybe to add, like words, like physical actions often cause something that is the damage is like a one-time damage, Words once it goes out there nowadays, like words on the internet, even worse. Yeah, it continues to go on to cause harm. I think slander that we know as slander, I trust that none of us, in this wonderful company that we have here, will go engage in. The problem is the slander that we don't know are slanderers.
Mm. Oh.
So not knowing is more dangerous. At least if you knowingly slander, like, okay, I'm doing something very bad right now, but I cannot control it. I'm going to slander them. But not knowing that that is a slander, that's, really dangerous. Jealousy is harmful on the path. Jealousy and pride are like two sides of the same coin. Similarly, jealousy will make you incapable of accomplishing what you really want. So it says that with jealousy, then our ability to accomplish what we really want is diminished. So it's very interesting. So the opposite of jealousy is to rejoice, rejoicing in others' success. Right? It says that when you are able to rejoice in others' success, it will help you reach your own successes. So that jealousy actually damages your ability to accomplish what you want. Alcohol brings one to ruin, he said. Right? If you don't confess misdeeds through the four powers, you'll wander among the six realms of beings, he said. So the misdeeds of body, speech, and mind needs to be confessed and purified, done away with the four powers. So the footnote tells us what they are. Four powers, as I call them, the four R's. The power of reliance, and that's talking about relying on the three jewels, knowing that they serve as the reference point for what purification, being purified of the faults means, the three jewels, right? Then they also provide the means of how to do that. So the power of reliance. Then the power of regret. You have to regret. You have to see the faults of those actions. And then the power of resolve. Then you have to resolve, like, I'm not going to repeat this, otherwise you keep doing it again and again and again. And then the power of remedy, which is specific techniques or specific do's and don'ts that you then carry out in order to, specifically here, in order to uproot those seeds that have been planted, the negative seeds that have been planted. So if you don't do that, you'll wander among the six realms of beings, he said. If you don't make efforts in the accumulation of merit, you won't attain the happiness of liberation, he said. And so what is this accumulation of merit? Again, often I think the word accumulation, just turns us, hippies at heart, turns us off, accumulation. Immediately we think of hoarding. And then, Protestant hippies, have another layer of brainwashing, Oh, this is like buying indulgences. Oh, this is a papist, evil. Then when we learn about accumulation of merit, you're like, I don't like that. Aren't we supposed to give up? So this is basically, gathering together all the resources that are necessary for this long journey. Make sure you have enough fuel. Make sure you have enough fuel for your vehicle. Make sure you have enough fuel for yourself. Make sure you have a good, GPS. Make sure that you have good driving companions. All those things. You have to gather together, right? These conducive factors. Right? That's what accumulation of merit means. So without enough merit, you can't get to where you want to. You won't attain the happiness of liberation, he said. If you don't abandon the 10 non-virtues, then you must experience the suffering of the lower realms, he said. So the 10 non-virtues, 3 of the body and 4 of speech and 3 of the mind, those basically needs to be abandoned. If you don't give them up, no amount of meditation is going to get you out of this mess. For that matter, no amount of being a good person, seemingly, is going to get you out of trouble if you cannot continue to create the causes of suffering and still say, I want to get out of suffering. So the causes of suffering are summarized by the 10 non-virtues. This is especially something that needs to be repeated because especially to people who practice like Vajrayana or Tibetan Buddhism, because there's so much, about how certain mantras, certain deities, can destroy so much negative karma, or even more Dzogchen or more Mahamudra, like, oh, instant realization, you go beyond all of this. Yeah, but if you don't see and recognize clearly where suffering comes from, you are not going to be able to actualize all these, fantastic, great sounding things. If you don't meditate on emptiness and compassion, you won't attain ultimate Buddhahood, he said. So in the end, Buddhahood is achieved when emptiness and compassion are unified. That's another, right, of those creative tensions. There's another one of those, like standing on the razor blade. Don't fall on to one side or the other side. Yeah. Compassion itself, more specifically here, the definition of being able to relate to all sentient beings as our old mother. That sense of like, that affectionate sense of like, they are all my mothers. If you have that kind of compassion, but you don't have emptiness, then a lot of suffering. But if you have, like emptiness and you don't have that compassion, then also a lot of suffering. You fall into the two extremes when you have one and not the other. But those two are necessary. So under compassion, you can say it includes loving kindness. And it includes the resolve to achieve Buddha for the sake of all beings. So those 3 elements, loving kindness, compassion, and the resolve, often just said bodhicitta. Jewel Ornament of Liberation talks about this. Loving kindness, compassion, and the resolve to be Buddha for the sake of others, that is compassion. That compassion, that general term compassion, needs to be fused with wisdom of emptiness. And that would be absolute bodhicitta in Lojong terms. These are the 2 bodhicittas. If you don't train like that, if you don't cultivate emptiness, realization of emptiness and compassion, then you won't attain supreme Buddhahood. If you want to attain Buddhahood in this life, look undistractedly at your mind. So this is like mind instructions. Yeah, like you have to really know how your mind works. For the ultimate condensed meaning of the Tantras, meditate on the 6 dharmas. Probably better translation is cultivate the 6 dharmas. So this is the 6 dharmas of Naropa. These are like the most famous one is the Chandali, or the inner heat, Tummo meditation. Then the yoga or the dharma of Bardo, dharma of clear light, dharma of illusory body. Yeah. Dharma of transference, Powa. So these are specific yogic technology, so to say, that Naropa learned from Tilopa. Tilopa condensed from his many teachers into these 6 dharmas. So here, I think to meditate on, I gives the wrong impression, like as if these are topics that you meditate on, but they're actually techniques that you cultivate. So I think better to say cultivate the 6 dharmas. And so for Milarepa, just to point out, okay, for Milarepa, it's quite clear that he feels very strongly that in order for Mahamudra to be realized in this lifetime, you have to rely on at least some, if not all, of these 6 dharmas, which comes squarely from the Vajrayana yogic tradition, and it involves manipulating internal energy, breath exercises, physical movements, the subtle body. Yeah? Not all 6 of them are that complex, but the main one of the inner heat, that is requires that kind of and also like flexibility of body. So for Milarepa, he sees no other way. Yeah? But I can say for Gampopa, he has a different. He feels that in order to realize Mahamudra, going that route is one route. So Gampopa also taught Mahamudra without him. He said, you don't absolutely need. So here you see that, his opinion and his teacher's opinion diverge. I think it's okay for us to see this, Sometimes they shy away from, oh, no, it's the same thing, No. Each of them bring unique kind of emphasis on how they understand the material. So again, for Milarepa, I think there's no doubt that he thinks this is absolutely necessary. In fact, later, right, when I mentioned like Sakya Pandita, the great scholar of the Sakya lineage, in fact, he would say, he said, look, your own teacher or your own lineage, Milarepa says you need these things. And why? You, Gampopa, who say that you follow Milarepa, why are you teaching something else? Then in a very, Tibetan, Asian, traditional, very, very conservative, so then, frankly, I think then the Kagyupas have to do like logical gymnastics to get out of that criticism and say like, well, these are hidden intentions, They have to do all kinds of explaining away, why Gampopa spoke differently from Milarepa. I don't know if we need to, defend either one of them. In fact, we're not qualified, For us, it's more to see, okay, how can I, take to heart what is being said here? Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Okay, so I've grown up in a family of Gampopa's lineage, and not emphasizing very much these 6 dharmas,
Yes.
practices,
Yes.
but they are emphasized in some places, right?
Yes. Yes.
Is it
Yes.
Nyingma people?
Sorry?
Is it Nyingma?
No. In like Kagyu, it's emphasized.
In Kagyu?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
But you don't hear much about it because although they emphasized,
Yeah.
they keep it very secret.
So I haven't gotten there yet, probably.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, they will also say to you, they will say to me, they will say to Melissa, maybe I think the youngest in this group, like, okay, sorry, too late already.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Because our channels, right, are already too stiff,
Too
not
rude.
flexible enough.
That's what Mick just said. Too
Yeah.
late.
Yeah, our channels are already too stiff,
Well, we do
Uh,
have Anna taught. We have a POA practice that Anna used to teach.
yeah.
Yes.
That kind of poa is different
Okay.
from
No.
the 6 dharmas poa.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
That kind of poa, like is said to be Buddhahood without meditation. I mean, it's yeah, there's a lot of hyperbole, in Tibetan, Buddhahood without meditation. Oh yeah, yeah. It's like, oh wait, what about this 10-day retreat? What are you doing if you're not meditating? Hick, 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 for 10
Okay.
days.
So it's
Mm.
Buddhism light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay.
But yeah, so these things, 3-year retreatants, they do. And then they're drying, right? These sheets,
Yeah.
in the middle of winter, things like that. And so they are following, Milarepa's way. And Sakyapas, they also do that. Gelugpas, but very, very restricted.
Okay. Thank you.
To the degree that when you actually finally learn something about the techniques, you're like, wait a minute, these hatha yoga people are doing at the yoga studios.
Yeah.
You're like, what's the big deal? Well, I don't know. Okay. Again, another of the Wisdom Experience podcast, they interview Alejandro Shaul, who has been teaching these movements, but from a Pumpo background.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
he works in the cancer division at Rice University Hospital System, where for years he has been teaching these for pain management for cancer patients, working with doctors there.
Yeah.
So Alejandro, we were friends in graduate school, but we've not seen each other for many years. So it's good to listen to him talk about. He said, like even among the Pumpos, at first there was hesitation. Should we talk about this publicly or not? And he says it continues to be an issue.
Yeah.
But he says, fortunately, from this perspective, he said that the teachers that he is working with, they all seem to think it's okay to be more open about this. And yeah. So there's a whole range of attitudes. Yeah.
Mhm.
But it's also quite clear that Gampopa himself, said, that's not necessary. But as a tradition, the institution that we call Kagyu, whether it's Drigong Kagyu, Talong Kagyu, Drupa Kagyu, I think it's because of Sakya criticisms,
Yeah.
they have walked back some of Gampopa's claims, whether it's necessary or not necessary.
Mm.
Yeah, so they have kind of walked back a little by saying it's necessary. Yeah. So like in 3-year retreat programs, usually when you add it all up, about 1 year of that 3-year, if it's done in a traditional way, is focused on the 6 dharmas.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the reason why the 6 dharmas is emphasized, like by Milarepa, it's said that because, okay, so you can almost say that there is the view side and there is the technique side, right? So the view side is represented by majority of the Mahamudra material that is available out there,
Yeah.
including on the Nyingma side of things,
Yeah.
what you would call the mind series. Dzogchen has 3 series: mind series, space series, and Menga pith instruction series, right? A lot of what people call Dzogchen, again, in the books that are translated, they're all from the Mind series,
Okay.
which is almost indistinguishable from Mahamudra,
Yeah.
because it's about, oh, it's empty and yet it's clear and then it's all pervading, right? They're talking, you could say, view. They're talking about, finally, when you're Buddha, this is what it is like. So they're talking about that in 100 different ways, but basically down to the same thing. So then also I will say, a lot of people who think they're doing Dzogchen, they're just meditating on, oh, the mind is spacious and da da da, But according to Dzogchen, how do you get there? They have the equivalent of the 6 dharmas.
Okay. So that's the technique side.
Yeah, the technique side of
Technique
things.
side.
Now, here is, so what I was going to say is, here is that if you talk to Milarepa, so to say, if you can, get him to the Wisdom Podcast interview,
Yeah.
then he will say, yeah. All the theory or the ideas of how the mind is and this and that, Okay, great. Now you think you know it, but you cannot really experience it, because right now we have so much karmic obstacles. And if you don't rely on the 6 dharmas, there's no way to create enough of a gap for you to perceive your nature. So the techniques of the 6 dharmas, or the 6 yogas of Naropa, and related things in the Dzogchen system, which is called Togya, Trecha and Togya. So this is from within the 3rd series, the pith instruction series, Menga De. They divide their practices into Trecha and Togya. Trecha is like direct cut, literally. Togya is the leap over, leaping over and direct cut. Trecha, direct cut, is very similar to Mahamudra, and also to all the stuff in the Mind series of Dzogchen. Togya is where all the kind of like very detailed techniques are all. It includes things like pressing your eyeballs.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you induce certain things that you will see from, like, pressing, or like staring into the sun, which will lead to blindness. And Khenpo Jigpun, the great Nyingma master of this century, many years later part of his life, he was practically blind. But that's not a big deal, in the context of becoming Buddha. I mean, to us, it's like, But yeah, it has exercises like that, to kind of induce, to cut through all the karmic baggage. So in fact, Gampopa, even before he came to Milarepa, he already received a lot of instructions about the nature of mind. But apparently he could not really experience it. So when he came to see Milarepa, maybe I mentioned this. Milarepa said to him, so what have you learned so far? And he said, oh, I received this, which is like, he received Chakasamvara, he did Chakasamvara, he received Vajrayogini, he did Vajrayogini, right? And he received the, instructions on all the sutras, and then he received the mind instructions. This is all from his Kadampa masters and from other masters too. Then apparently Milarepa said to him, well, the Kadampa lineage got the oral instructions, but due to a demon obstructing Atisha wasn't able to pass down the pith instructions. This is playing on the word ka, kadam. Ka is like oral instructions. So he says, you kadampa got the ka, but you did not get the menga, which is like the real essence. Because Atisha's sponsor prohibited him from teaching, from passing down, because they were too risque. So he's talking about, Milarepa seemingly is talking about Atisha's main successor, Dromtumpa. But Kadampa said Dromtumpa is Avalokiteshvara, and Dalai Lama is from that line, Dromtumpa's reincarnation. But apparently Milarepa said, that demon hampered Atisha's full transmission. So that's why he said to Gampopa, that's why no matter how much you practice, you're not going to get it. So Gampopa said, well, then I'm here, take me. Milarepa said, okay. So through Milarepa's guidance, Gampopa was able to cut through all his karmic baggage, and actually experience nature of mind, so that everything he learned from the Kadampas now fell into place, right? And Gampopa became awake. So the usual Kagyu party line is that then Gampopa taught exactly what Milarepa taught. But as pointed out, even by their contemporaries, 1 or 2 generations later, Sakya Pandita go, I don't think so. Somehow Gampopa went back to teaching the less sexy stuff. Yeah, so from Gampopa's perspective, it appears. In fact, we have in Gampopa's biography, towards the end of his life, when people came to him and say, can I get instructions on the 6 dharmas? He said, go talk to someone else. Yeah. Sometimes some of his disciples, he said, okay, you go talk to him. And towards the end of his life, the only teachings he would entertain are when people come to get introduction, nature of mind. That he continued to give. And he gave those instructions outside the context of ritual. Again, for the Sakyapas, you can only do it in the context of empowerment. That these powerful states of mind can be revealed only in the context of empowerment, according to strict Sakyapas. But Gampopa more and more felt like no need. So Gampopa even would initiate people into Vajrayogini practice without first initiating them into Chakra-samvara. Again, if you follow the literal kind of requirements according to the Chakra-samvara system, as taught by the Indian masters, well, apparently, yes, you first need to be initiated into Chakra-samvara, then later on, you can be further kind of blessed into doing Vajrayogini. But again, Gampopa was innovating by our standards. For us, it's a good word, but for Tibetans, that's a bad word.
Right.
But Gampopa was innovating. He said, that's okay. Just this simplified Vajrayogini empowerment is enough for you to do what you need to do with it and to achieve the results. And there, Gampopa emphasized, even more than Milarepa, you see it with Milarepa for sure, but more than Milarepa, more than Marpa, what Gampopa really brought in as a substitute, right, to like the 6 dharmas and all of that, right? Devotion.
Wow.
Devotion. So he was devoted to Milarepa, but he did not necessarily transmit like Milarepa's insistence of 6 dharmas. So in place of this very, kind of intensive manipulation of energy, Gampopa kept saying, devotion, devotion, devotion. And in terms of this, I can say from being trained in the history of religions in a secular, Western, you can see this pattern all throughout South Asian religion. The tension between yogic mastery and devotion. They're not always against, they're often combined. But you do see these two kind of tracks. So Shaiva, so Shiva-based traditions, not that they don't emphasize devotion, but they're more yogic in nature. They're more into manipulating energy. And so Shaivites and Shakti, followers of the goddess, again, not that they don't emphasize devotion, but they tend to have more technique-oriented spiritual practice. On the other side of this is Vaishnavites, the Krishna people. Oh, it's all about, dance and, la 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 la,
Yeah.
It's all about heart. It's all about heart,
So I have another question, if you'll
Yes.
indulge me. So since none of us on this screen right now are likely to do a 3-year retreat in this lifetime, and you said,
Melissa.
yeah, maybe we'll aim her there. Support you, Melissa.
We'll dedicate our merit to her doing a 3-year retreat.
But you also started this meeting off by saying that there's a lot of mysteries in here that are not for us anyway.
Yes, yes.
So if you could bring it back to that, like, what is this, to us?
Oh, we can take all the things that we are able to take, like just what we have covered, right? Reliance on the 3 jewels are excellent. Keep faith as a friend. Concepts is a demon. Pride is a great Mara. Slender is dangerous.
Yeah.
I'm just saying the things where you find like, oh my God, what is he talking about? Then leave it alone. That means, not really meant for us.
Okay. And
But so much of it is relevant to us, especially his emphasis on, the determination to be free.
okay.
Yeah. So if you ask me, right, if you were to line up these heroes, so to say, and like what aspect of my practice should I model towards who, right?
Yeah.
Then for me, Milarepa is this absolute commitment to being free.
Okay.
I look at Milarepa. When we find ourselves getting caught up in, especially maybe not you guys, like me, I'm in the system,
Yes.
So the system itself can be such a trap.
Yes.
Then look to Milarepa. He points directly to your first responsibility is a commitment to be free. So much he can give us there. Then I look to Gampopa for his style of combining this commitment to be free with bodhicitta. That is really his Kadampa legacy. Again, not that Milarepa doesn't talk about bodhicitta, but it's pales in comparison. Gampopa's emphasis on bodhicitta. And nowhere in here does Milarepa ever quote Shantideva, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
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 Again, not that it's not bodhicitta is not important, but it's just not where I go to look for bodhicitta. So Gampopa. And so that's how I think, we can relate to. Yeah, we take what we can take, as the Dalai Lama says. What you cannot take, just leave it alone. Don't like, don't denigrate that because it's useful to somebody else.
Yes.
Just because it's not useful to us.
Yes.
I no need to argue either.
Yeah.
It's just like, well, not relevant to me. Okay, Yeah, so back to, there's these two dynamic that you find in South Asian religion, that I think carries over to Buddhism too. So on the one side is the more using, technique, using manipulation, using force, to kind of push you to the next. Then there is the devotion, opening the heart, opening the heart, opening the heart. When I was teaching college, and sometimes I teach a course on Hinduism, and I said that so Hinduism, again, you can see these two patterns. Very clearly in Hinduism, and so very clearly too in Buddhism, right? So, for example, the Pure Land tradition, that's all about devotion. Yeah, devotion. So, Poa is a good case. Yeah? The Poa that we do, outside the context of the 6 yogas, is not very technique oriented.
Mm-hmm.
It's about making supplication to Amitabha and the lineage masters, which is basically saying, pull me up, with your compassion, take me up, collect me. But the Poa found in the 6 yogas, much more technique oriented. So certain Poa practice, like I think I've seen certain, like in the Nyingma, certain Poa practice, like compared to the one I'm familiar with, which is very simple. Just from the center of your heart, is a pea-sized, nature of your mind, shoot it, right? But there are some where the other openings, should be blocked with syllables. Hong, 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 hong syllable you have to visualize, right? And then also, like during the practice, you practice like when you're ejecting the consciousness, you pull up, you tighten all your lower muscles. They say you close those doors, and then you then kind of right in the final, you like tighten up and you pull up. And so various lineages, even in the teaching of Poa, would have different emphasis. Then the Poa that is most famous in Tibet is actually the Drigung Poa. Drigung Poa instructions never go into the technical side of things. Always like, Amitabha, oh Amitabha, oh Amitabha, and trust, Amitabha will pull you up, you just need to let go of this, and Amitabha will pull you up, so a lot of heart.
I don't know which one Anna taught us, but she used to go do Poa with people who were being executed.
Right.
And, that was, she taught it to us, but I've never practiced it myself.
Yeah, so so Milarepa definitely is very yogic. Yeah. Very yogic.
Yogi, right?
Yeah. In the sense of yoga being, harnessing of energy. Yeah. So for the ultimate condensed meaning of the instructions, meditate on, cultivate the secret mantra, the path of means, he said. So here the path of means, right? Here, by secret mantra is not just talking about idam practice. The path of means is talking about the six dharmas. So sometimes you'll see the path of means and the path of liberation. The path of liberation is the devotion based, but it's not devotion in the Hindu sense, okay? To God, and God is going to save you. This devotion is a state of mind that then allows you to see the nature of your mind. It's still directed at, devotion is a precondition for realizing nature of mind. And nonetheless, it is the realization of nature of mind. And then, not just realization is just the start. The realization of nature of mind, followed by habituating that realization. And the habituating is what's going to kind of cool down the inflammation, allow the waves to settle. So when I say devotion, I don't mean like, Hare Krishna Bhakti. No, this is about using devotion as the way to cut through your karmic baggage in a way that Milarepa will use tummo to burn karmic energy. I think that's one way to think about the difference. Milarepa says you need to use inner heat to burn through your nonsense. Gampopa seems to be saying, yes, you could do that, but that's not very practical for most people. So therefore, you take the path of devotion, because devotion will also cut through, and maybe not the word cut through. It will open the heart. Yeah. So this is one way of looking at it. Milarepa's way is to cut through so that you can see. Gampopa's way is to let go so that you can see. And you let go by cultivating devotion. And that's when you perceive Guru as Buddha. So Guru as Buddha is not talking about, and I think maybe that was where the misunderstanding a few weeks ago. It's not are you my teacher or not teacher? We're not talking about that. We're talking about, adopting some human person and say, this is going to be my template of seeing someone as Buddha. That is Gampopa's emphasis. You do that, he says, and that will clear everything for you. Then you will be able to see your nature of mind. Then you have to habituate that nature of mind. So likewise, then I was saying in the Nyingma Dzogchen system, most of what I see people talk about Dzogchen, like teachers teaching Dzogchen, they're teaching Treche, which is like the Mahamudra. They're not teaching Togyo. Publicly, I think only a few. Gangten Rinpoche is teaching Togyo. Namkai Norbu Rinpoche maybe was teaching Togyo, but even that, maybe not so much. Very few are actually teaching Togyo. So there are things like, maybe you have heard of this, like you select a spot and then you act out the confusions of the six realms. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Bark like a dog.
Yeah.
Bark like a dog, quack like a duck, and whatever that comes to mind. You act it out. The Rajneesh people took a page from that and took it to complete wanton, acting out.
Right.
That's the only difference. In Dzogchen, it's actually said in Togyo, no, you don't. There's always a part where you're acting out. Whereas Rajneesh, they call it dynamic meditation, and maybe some of you are familiar. Yeah. It's like whatever comes to mind, act out, as long as, even there's a caveat, as long as you're not harming someone or yourself. But otherwise, anything is allowed. And so a lot of craziness. But it's sort of based on, I think he read about, this Togel, and then different body postures in Togel. Yeah. So there are things, like that. If you wish for respect, renown, and gain, you'll be delivered to the mouth of Mara, he said. Yeah, so these are things, like Milarepa that is relevant to us. Yeah. If you praise yourself and disparage others, you'll fall off a frightful precipice. If you don't tame the elephant of mind, then you'll be deceived by the key instructions words. Yeah, so the key instructions, this is what I translate as the pith instructions. Yeah? If you don't tame the mind, these words, can lead to mischief. Because some of these words will say things like, beyond good and bad.
Yeah.
But if your mind is not tamed yet, that instruction is very dangerous. To rouse bodhicitta is the greatest crop, he said. The greatest crop to invest in, to plant, is rousing bodhicitta. The view of birthlessness is excellent, he said, for the non-origination of all phenomena, birthlessness. For practice, the path of means is profound. Okay, so he comes back to the path of means.
Yeah.
Which is those yogic techniques. Yeah. So for Milarepa, even like what we call yidam practice, right? Like taking on the pride of the deity, he sees it as simply preparing the container for practicing the path of means. Yeah. But for many of us, we see that as the end itself, like how to more effectively experience Buddha nature, experience the deity, without thinking of it as a stepping point to doing the forceful yoga. But for Milarepa, he says, no, you need to do that. Yeah. And then, more specifically, right? Apply it. What is it? The view of birthlessness with the nadis and pranas. So now he's giving some details about the path of means. Nadis are the energy channels. Pranas are the winds that move. Recognize co-emergence, he said. So co-emergence is the co-emergence of confusion and awaken. So what that means in this context is recognize how in any moment of our being confused in samsara, the freedom from confusion is not that far off. It's co-emergent. It's there. It's the other side. Follow a noble Lord, meaning follow a reliable guru. Don't let your life be carried by distraction. Look at the unborn nature of your mind. Don't hope for happiness in samsara. Don't see suffering as a fault. So this is like, we practice dharma because we see suffering and we don't want suffering. But here he says, at some point you need to reevaluate how you handle suffering. If you realize the mind that is Buddhahood, he said, there's no need for many elaborations. There are no more profound points than these, he said. Put them into practice. Now, going back to the two kind of sites, right? The site that emphasizes the necessity of yogic manipulation and the side that emphasizes, devotion. Even in Marpa going to India, he received those two streams. Naropa definitely emphasize the use of this path of means. Maitripa emphasize the path of liberation. So even among the Mahasiddhas of India, you find some of the Mahasiddhas that places more emphasis on the path of means, and you have Mahasiddhas that places more emphasis on being beyond the path of means. For example, those of you who know like the Ganga Mahamudra by Tilopa, you'll see that according to Tilopa, when he's instructing Naropa, he actually says, those who, it's like the Ganga Mahamudra, he is taking the approach of, if you devote yourself to the Guru, if you have great confidence in the Guru can show you this, and then you don't need any of the contrived methods. Failing in that, then you take the approach of the contrived methods. He says at the end, the whole chunk of Ganga Mahamudra, 28 verses, almost like 24 or 25 of the verses, is about non-contrived ways. At the end, he says, okay, if you cannot get there through that, okay, then you can try the other stuff. In fact, there he says, like sexual yoga, with an actual partner. He says that's like the path for dummies. It's like if you don't get it, through the uncontrived way, then you can go do all those messy things. Yeah. In fact, you see it. Saraha talks like that. Maitripa definitely talks like that. Like, oh God, those things. Like then they start off by saying, those Hindus and their fire rituals. Yeah, let them go do that. Then even like oh, those Buddhists and their things. Let them go do that. Then even like the practice of like harnessing energy, hatha yoga, some of these Mahasiddhas, they said, that's all contrived. There's a much more natural way. And Gampopa seems to pick up on that. So Sakya Pandita then criticized Gampopa because what Sakya Pandita was reading is more on the path of means. So even for Western Buddhist scholars who were introduced to this material, there was an earlier part of Buddhist scholarship where they look at Gampopa and they say, Gampopa maybe was influenced by Chinese Zen people, which is exactly what Sakya Pandita accused Gampopa of. And even an earlier part of Buddhist scholarship, like Western Buddhist scholarship, before Tibetans came out of Tibet, when people look at the Zen material, they say, oh, that's Taoist influence. That's Taoist stuff. But at this point of, like kind of secular Buddhist scholarship, now we're seeing actually what the Zen people are saying, what the Kagyu people are saying. You can find them in the Mahasiddhas. There were already Indian Mahasiddhas talking like this. So these different strains of Buddhist practice. The more mainstream ones are the things that come out of Nalanda University. Very sophisticated, very learned. Then there are strains where it's very yogic. Then there's also a very heart-based. So all these diversity of Indian Buddhisms, So for us, just know what to take that most relevant to us. John Donne, who is one of the key Buddhist studies people in American Academy. He teaches at the University of Wisconsin in medicine. His early publications are all on like logic, Buddhist logic, very difficult topics.
He's on Dharma Center.
But his root guru is Chugi Nima Rinpoche. So he's now also, focusing more and more on the more meditative, the more non-conceptual. I was listening to one of his teachings. He said, like, in Tibetan Buddhism, if you follow this lineage or that lineage, so there is a set, kind of like everybody when they get together, they know what they're chanting, they know what they're, doing. Mm-hmm. But then he said, but then when you look at each individual's like, bundle of texts, everyone's bundle is different from everyone else's bundle. Mm-hmm. So he says, so there's a lot of flexibility when it comes to, when you're sitting at home yourself or in your room or in your monk cell or whatever, right? There's a lot of diversity. Mm-hmm. In the same monastery, in the same retreat center, everyone's bundle is going to be different. Mm-hmm. But when you enter the assembly hall, yes, you cannot, I want to do this, I want to do this. Everybody does the same thing. Mm-hmm. But don't let that everybody does the same thing when together give the mistaken, idea that everyone is doing the same thing. He says, no, you just have to look at their personal bundle. There's a lot of other things going on. Yeah, so I think, like sometimes, I think at EBS, right, especially Tibetan, those of us attracted to the Tibetan, we might feel like, like, oh, we don't have enough, commonality going on, Well, on the one hand, yeah, everyone's bundle is so different. But even, people following the same guru will have a different bundle when you get to the level of looking at what's in that bundle, and that is just standard. That is just how it's done. So anyway, this website is alive now, what I've been working on. So
GRI.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can wander around in there. We'll slowly add things. There's one area called community that's password protected. It's not fully developed yet, but basically in there would be sort of like the old-fashioned discussion boards, where you can post and, have these levels of conversation going on. It's a way to kind of, the intention is ambitious. I don't know if I have enough support to get there yet. It's a way for people to pull back a little from social media and go to more dedicated spaces for Dharma connection and Dharma discussion. So if this goes well, I think I will pull back, more and more from like Facebook, and just to remind people there is an alternate platform, just as the Proud Boys and those people are now going somewhere else, right? Handler or whatever,
Yeah.
So now, also the Dharma, need to kind of get away from that stuff, there's all sorts of stuff is rushing at us on Facebook,
Yeah.
I don't think I will, leave it, but just to point people to, hey, you want to have a more focused and meaningful, use of technology, come to this website for the things that I do. So a lot of the talks that I've done, teachings, ongoing teachings, is now all on YouTube. But again, on YouTube, you can go there and then be distracted by, all sorts of things. So slowly, I'm migrating everything onto this website.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, and then along those lines, just so you know, so then there's more of a sense of, and again, like I don't have the kind of support or the ability to do what, way more experience and, supported teachers are able to do, as I've encouraged you guys in the past. If you want to be supported by a program, the Triple Excellence program is one that you can be supported. So that, remains, I think there's a lot of programs out there that you can connect to as part of your personal bundle, but it need not be exclusive is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So I've been meeting, well, until now, of course, now all it's on Zoom. But before pandemic, Wednesday night is when I meet with the local Sangha, focus on Tibetan Buddhist practice, and specifically on what I, am able to share and teach. Is the Kagyu Sangha in the local group. But now, enough people from different parts of the world, different time zones, want to have a more focused practice of the set of practices that I emphasize. So if you all want to do it, and it doesn't contradict what you're already doing, then Wednesday night is the context for doing that. So if you go to the website, you'll see reference to the Drigong Dharma Kirti International Sangha, DDIS. So there will be the Drigong Dharma Kirti International Sangha gathering on Wednesday nights, which is the local, is now being transformed into a more accessible through Zoom. Everybody can just come onto Zoom. We usually meet from 7 to 9, but right now it's still under the old format. The new DDIS is not up and running yet, but soon it will be that time slot, 7 to 9. And it doesn't assume at all any kind of exclusivity. It doesn't commit people to, oh, you have to do X, Y, Z. But it's a context to be connected to a group of people who are connected to what I do in a more focused way. Yeah. But there's no training programs or anything envisioned. Two reasons. One, I do not have that kind of support to offer a training program for people. Secondly, I think there are different models, available. Not every teacher have to offer training programs and going through the stages. This one, it's maybe more loosey-goosey early Kagyu style, I would say. Less, organized.
I'm afraid the 12th step people are going to kick us out of here.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And I have to go do some house maintenance work. Yeah. I've sanded down the wall, the door, and the door frame. Now I need to go to the next part.
Well, thank you.
Okay, so I'll see you all whenever, maybe next Sunday. I mean Saturday, Sunday, next Sunday, or the following. Let's see. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ta-ta.